manage resources. There are colleges or at college level or at faculty level or at a department. And there are some people who have refused to declare their contacts and their links with donors. They still manage resources, financial and equipment personally. If we define the resources, there are under 3 levels or under 3 categories. The first one is time. The second is space. The third, we could talk of financials. And those in accounting and engineering, you understand that before anything's done, you have what we call BQs, bills of quantities. And this is something we lack in research. Although at the end of a concept or at the end of a proposal, we put budget, but in principle, we ought to change, we ought to migrate and behave like engineers, behave like accountants, come up with lines to do within our research, to deal within our research, append figures, compare with the market prices, revise the figures, and be like engineers, and we call them research BQs. The bills are the ones that hamper and reduce on the critical resource called time. As long as we are doing a practical research, as long as we are doing an inventory research, even if we are in social sciences, of recent, we see many communities get research fatigue because one researcher goes with about transport funds, a token of lunch, a token of, and then for you, you go to a community and all you can do is to make them live and stay on saliva and oxygen. So this is a very critical topic, which we overlook. Personally, I must have overlooked it while I was doing my master's and PhD research. But when it came to the students have supervised all the time, we've worked together to make sure we get at least time to read their work, to go to the field and do ground truthing. And about 60 to 70%, I tried to fundraise for my students, but the opportunity lay in the hands that I managed 4 big projects. One of them was under UNESCO and the ODIF called Pipan Plants. And another one was under the Millennium Science Initiatives, which we looped into Mbara University because Mbara University was planning to produce Master of Science and Master of Education. Therefore, resources, budgeting, apportioning modes, utilization plan are a very big drive if we are to succeed in research. But principally, the biggest resource is time. And in practice, you know that on this continent, which by geography standards, I don't know which continent we lie in, I don't know why that resource has definitely eluded our management skills, our management procedures, and we need to check on that. Maybe I was still on resource and time management. I could chip in the trends that have come right from lecturing to supervision to publication and probably information dissemination with communities, with the management of hospitals or associations, let's say for engineers, if you have been managing and supervising a student at PhD level and you have come up with new knowledge on how to manage civil works, on how to manage mechanical engineering, you need to or let's say on surveying, because we have a lot of land grabbing and other resources that the graduates on surveying have come up with solutions within the IT applications. You need to assemble the Society of Engineers and let them critique your new findings. Still on definitions, when we look at equipment, and as you know that the technology and equipment are just changing overnight. It's unfortunate some of us don't keep a museum of the equipment we use, but I have seen on Twitter and other social media, people have kept maybe the coins of shillings and other pounds and dollars from time to time. Of recent, people are showing us the different equipment we have used, let's say the torches, the cassettes, the video we used to put in the not the discs and others, and phones. You really get amazed on the collection. Therefore, equipment changes with time. And as supervisors, we need to take note of the changing equipment. But as it changes, how often do our departments, how often do our faculties and our universities support us to acquire new equipment? And today, I'm going to give you ideas, gimmicks, I would call them gimmicks, and solutions on how to get new equipment. We learned this when we visited Malaysia. We were amazed by the level of universities not owning their own space in terms of laboratories, in terms of theater, in terms of lecture rooms, the audio-visual lecture rooms. They are named under different companies, as the slides ahead will show us. And good enough, this morning as we crown the issue to do with resources, and we are chipping in another presentation by SRI, which is practical in equipment under GIS. So we shall see more of this. There are also resources that are consumables, which in most universities, if you are not steady and you don't record as a supervisor and as a graduate student, you might get problems of accountability because you shall have spent. So we need to keep all these receipts, we need to keep all the containers until such a time when the research or the project or the program has been closed and audited. I'll give an example. Many times you'll buy reagents, but you have different centers where you use reagents. Many times you'll be at a site for engineers and your graduate student is supervising the mansionettes and others and of interest. People must take stock of what they have used. Then there are non-consumables, laptops, and many other equipments which we have in our different disciplines, in our different subjects of investigation. And these must be well recorded, they must have serial numbers, they must have an inventory. Every project or every research should have an inventory book. And should there be a conflict of interest, let's say at VivaVoce, and they say you didn't use this, you didn't apply this, such inventories can actually get the supervisor and the student off the hook. By the way, many times, those who raise questions might not be very knowledgeable on the subject of supervision, on the subject of research. but out of what we know that is happening globally in terms of competition within the smaller spaces that are coming up. In history days, the spaces were big, but I can assure you the space has become as limited as a crucible. We need office space. I can assure you, you cannot do a master's or a PhD research and you supervise your student in the corridors or even in your own office. That's why in developed world, there are no more closed door offices. It is workstation. So I would expect every supervisor with PhD students, with master's students to have a workstation of about 4 or 5 spaces, so that even in the absence of you as the supervisor, the different students you supervise can discuss, can critique one another. And in the end, the work of the supervisor is reduced. And by the time the students go to present at the department, faculty, or college level, you find they say, oh, I wish I was supervised by so-and-so. Let's look at laboratory space. Of recent, laboratory space has decreased because very few universities are investing in construction, because construction is very expensive. You go to our old universities, for example, Makerere University or Chambogo University, until the centers of excellence came up to even give funding for construction of lecture rooms, laboratories, and research space offices, we were doing badly. These are some of the things when we get philanthropists, we need to be honest and talk about it. I get amazed when you go into university spaces and students are reading under trees. That should be a luxury. You can imagine, during our days at university, we had research carols. You could register for one at graduate level, but we need to increase space and even these students get to know. God forbid, there are some places where lightning can happen without any cloud, and trees are good conductors of energy, the lightning. So we might lose credible people. I think it's high time at the individual level and in departments to advise management so that all these things should be at leisure. But I wouldn't blame lecturers and supervisors and management at university structures of management, department, faculty, college, and even main administration. But I can assure you, most of our students don't listen. So this is the critical turning point where we must now educate our students, orient them into the real norm of how some of these things are done, especially if you are in the open and you are moving with sophisticated modern equipment, either in the bags or the like. But of course, we don't forget that a lot of theft, a lot of malpractice has come up because long time ago, you could leave your textbooks and scientific calculators in the library and you go for convenience or you go out for a quick bite, you'll come back and find it. But today you must be carrying a bag and must go with everything. There's also a definition I put down as specimen. We must outsource, we must source specimen. We must know how to handle specimen. We must know how to store a specimen. We must have storage space. For those of the researchers and supervisors who must even have animals, like research animals, the mice, the rats. I think in Uganda, those of you on the core of this conversation, you know how the mice has caused their honorable minister problems. So you wonder when you see someone without the knowledge critiquing a credible subject without prior knowledge, without the knowledge about it, and they are shooting questions of command. And this is where we have lost research in the developing world, particularly in East Africa, whereby anybody who goes into the legislature, you find he's an all-round legislator. He can shoot questions on engineering, he can shoot questions on science, he can shoot questions on medicine, veterinary and human medicine, he can shoot questions on the history. And by the way, as countries of Africa, we are losing the critical subject of research and supervision. The best research subject is history. If we look at critical thinking and philosophy of science, that is real history. When we move on to the next slide, we look at the direct and indirect resource mobilization that will get us to get all the equipment we need, all the publication into the best journals that we require. I put this slide, and beside I put an article in the Journal of Current Science, which is a very credible journal and hard to break into, simply because Uganda in 1994 produced an article in it by a great scientist and ecologist, Professor Alan Hamilton, who wrote a book on disappearing forests of Uganda. Because this credible ecologist produced a book and an article, a book chapter and an article in the Current Science Journal, the journal had money. And in 1999, it reached out to the foreword of the book chapter, Professor Frederick Kayanja, the then Vice Chancellor of Mbarara University, that it had money, the journal had money, and wanted an update of 1984 to come out in 2000. And for that matter, Mbarara University of Science and Technology got resources. There's been an argument through this course of how we can break into some of these big publishers and some of these big manufacturers of equipment. And this morning, we must come to understand that if we support staff qualifications piecemeal as a department, as a faculty, as a university, and we produce credible work, then we'll be looping and interjecting into credible field work, into the equipment we need for our laboratories, and into the data. Because within this funding, we even had money to pay for high-level analysis, because we had to agree with the National Forest Authority to access their data and analyze it to the requirements and demands of the current science journal. And I can assure you, this is one way on how universities and supervisors can get funding. Library. We forget many times in the recent time, I can say in the recent 2 to 3 decades, that physical hardcover books are not comparable to online materials. But then some universities have gone ahead to make sure that all their materials, reading materials they have, are online, which is very good, the e-journals. But the students must learn that at some point, there are key texts, there are key textbooks for subject and discipline they are doing. And some of these, we call them subject Bibles in quotes, subject Quran. But if we continue and we fail to break this perception that has come in, then in the future, we shall lose the opportunity to break into what we found has been very difficult, like Springer series, like conservation biology journal, and many, the sleep for health, the journal of sleep, the psychology journal of sleep. These are very important things that we must learn, and as supervisors, we must master. And when we master, then those we are mentoring get it easily and fast. Current science journal and conservation biology journal still have and continue to hold very big funding for students in the new areas that are coming up. We will learn that. I'll give an example of Winnie Penetrel National Park, where now we have a state-of-art hospital at Buhoma. This came up as a result of Mbarara University of Science and Technology doing practicum and being the pioneer of sending students into the field, the medical students, the pharmacy students, the nursing students. And some of the students, by doing a subject outside their discipline, interested these two journals, current science and conservation biology. They were amazed by the level of the medical and nursing students and pharmacy students documenting with authority the poisonous and medicinal plants we hold in the wind area. And we got funding for them to publish. And this went further to introduce many conservation biologists, many analytical and biochemistry research scientists to enter the same system. So it is upon the supervisors not to limit our knowledge within our own subject. We can see the spinning out lines of similar or close relatives to our main discipline, and we also venture into, after all, it is in recent science that we do multidisciplinary subject. In other words, very soon we shall find we are all one. When we move ahead to the next slide, we come to modern IT and equipment manufacturers. This is where I was saying we need gimmicks. Just recently, Bill Gates was in Kenya, but on a different mission. We know Bill Gates in his funding, he's been many years ago fascinated with computing and all those things, but now companies get spinning out lines. Bill Gates was in Kenya on the issue of green energy, on the issue of solar energy. And the county he was in, the counties he was in, Makueni, Machakos, and Kitui, have high insolation per unit area per day or per time. So if I'm in engineering, if I'm in plant ecology, if I'm in social sciences, all of us need energy to power our computers, to power our storage equipment, deep freezers, and the like. As a supervisor, one should take interest on the movement of these great philanthropists. Automated devices for handling experiments and simulated experiments need energy all the time. And the most reliable energy could be solar energy rather than the power surge we see. And modern equipment needs energy, and people need to read the directives, the caution on different equipments so that the equipment can have a long lifespan. Many times, someone will buy a phone and before the charging time you've been given for 4 hours, 7 hours, you just put on the phone. You never know. So in other words, technology has a way that we must respect it, but we intend to know everything now. This is why I put this slide. And if rich people, high and sophisticated equipment producers and manufacturers can take time to analyze, to understand some of these simple things we look at as simple, what about us? These are some of the things we need to teach our students, particularly those who are very busy, the working class, particularly those who employ those to do what should be done by the students. There are very many centers of writing theses, writing assignments, which have even gone online and are global. By the way, supervisors and fellow senior people, be very careful when some people send you a message that they want an article. Many times, those are not journals. Those are writing individuals, and they have Googled and found you are a class apart in the subject they are writing on to earn money. And they interest you to say, we have a special issue of a publication, and because of time and resources for us, we will not charge you. So present yourself on this topic. You are hooked, and the next day, you'll not even get a communication. The email that has requested for that write-up, you'll never find it again. Therefore, we need to protect our data. The data we collect using resources, the resources we have earned expensively, including time and resources, financial. And when you code it for such a gimmick, then you lose out. But of course, most times we keep our original data, which we can analyze to further levels, and eventually we do our work, but we must be very careful. Therefore, the gimmick I told you about is if we approached some of the companies like Samsung, because not only do they produce phones, they produce other sophisticated research equipment, analysis equipment, and we approach Apple, we approach Nokia, we approach Techno, we approach Microsoft and IBM. I can assure you some of our departments, some of our faculties will be used as these companies' research centers, especially in the engineering, especially in IT and computer applications. And of course, when we coordinate with engineering and IT, then you find these equipment manufacturers will want to spin out into new areas, and we shall be used as departments and researchers and supervisors spearhead their new research on new equipment generation and evolution. And I want to assure you, this is how some of the great universities in what we can't do in our East African universities have excelled. We were in Malaysia as ICAD team, and the hospitals, particularly in orthopedic surgery, have equipment which the many years I worked at Mbara University, I traversed Kampala International University Teaching Hospital, and other places I've visited, the University of Cape Town Teaching Hospital, I never saw that equipment. So it's high time as supervisors that we reach out and try to knock on the doors of these great companies. The next slide takes us to software applications in report writing. Many times, we've talked about plagiarism. We've talked about how our students take time to finish their work. And having said time is the greatest resource in research and supervision, then we need to take our students through the quick modes, like how you can auto-summarize, how you can have procedures that will help you not have your work be labeled as plagiarism. This is just to spice up what Professor Josephine, what Professor Tisekwa and Dr. John Kinyuru went through, because if we do this, then we shall have saved on the time. If we do this, then the procedures of the students we are supervising will be followed systematically and in a short time. For example, a department might wish on a short notice to request all the students under your supervision to present. Maybe there has been a visiting team and this team is a funding body, or they want to see what researches they have funded or are still funding are going. So a document can be auto-summarized on computer and the student gets the salient points. Or at another level, when you go to auto-summarize, there are 4 sections where you can have highlight of keywords or technical subject words within the, we can also use this as we mark our students. So quick scan of favorable journal breakthrough is also done using this, because journals are subject specific. The moment you don't measure up to 55% of the subject specificity the journal has, your publication will not be accepted. And finally, as I had said up there, this helps us to avoid plagiarism, and we can use the softwares that are all over and even are free, and we teach our students. We even teach ourselves on how to get to the expected levels. The next slide takes us to the slogan that most of us could have seen and is now a common jargon: better stand on shoulders of giants, and that's when you will be somewhere. We need to make sure that we are out and informed about the next seminars, the next workshops, the conferences that are coming next, or policy body and associations that deal or are interested in the work we are doing and are in line with the research themes we are working on, so that this notion of people making unqualified statements and conclusions and policy briefs that eventually, when people are critiquing them, then you wonder who was behind everything. I was amazed recently in the argument, maybe it has been on social media and all of us are there. Why, for example, we have so many technical problems in the built environment, collapsing buildings, collapsing bridges, roads that don't leave the initial signed time. Then several problems we have seen in and the loopholes in the recent policy and legislation on anti-homosexuality Uganda did. But I was amazed at the level of the engineers explaining several problems with the built environment, the doctor who explained the psychological and physical anatomy related to the bill that Uganda passed. So that gave me an understanding that if anybody is to do something and has the knowledge, then nobody will question. And this is where we should be in terms of planning resources. Why should you supervise Dominic at PhD or at master's, and down the road, all the time and resources both of us used are critiqued negatively and go back to square one? I was reading on Twitter last night, and some professor has had to withdraw a paper on a subject that is current. Therefore, that kills his long life profile. This is something we can stop if we plan very well of all the resources that we invest in a research, in a supervision. Most time graduate students success emanates from a variety of several critiques, several comments, through publication trial and comments that help improve write-up for book chapters, proposals, book proposal, top class publishers, as they are listed down there. I brought in this bullet point to say that in order to save on our time, we need to teach our students on how to propose to write an article. Before we quote a certain article, before we quote a certain publisher for a book chapter, have we taught our students how to write a proposal to publish? Many times, you will agree with me that even some of us who tried to write proposals for book chapters, I did mine when I was doing my postdoc at York, because the first assignment my promoter or supervisor did was, Dominic, we are going to publish our work in Blackwell Publishers. So these are the guidelines on how to write a book chapter proposal. So I want you in the next 2 weeks, present this to me. And then after I've gone through your work, we shall present to the department so that some senior people buy in and we write the book chapter together. I want to assure you, I had about 4 sleepless nights. But when I compared with another postdoc student, although she was doing something else on the nitrogen levels within the depleted soils in Derby Forest, then I got an idea. And when I presented, I want to assure you, I was relieved. So as we supervise, you find it is not the student who is more concerned. It is you and me, the supervisors, who are more concerned. As we take our students, if I can use a live example, we take our students even to nursery school, and you are a known professor, you are a known great person in a university, in university management, and people see you on graduations. Then when you take Dominic, your son, to nursery school, Jane, your daughter, to Grace, your daughter, to a nursery school, you are the one reading, because you'll feel ashamed if the one of your own doesn't measure to the expectation. And the best way to do that is to gradually do what it takes to mentor that child of yours, to mentor that student you are supervising step by step, and to even monitor and evaluate that this student I'm supervising is to the measure. That's how we broke through, and finally, some of the publications that we've done, you can monitor them. Are they followers of the subject and the discipline you are published on? Are there co-authors who are interested to even invite you for yet another book chapter, so that you can even invite your master's and PhD students to submit some paragraph and you put their name and how many views have been made, how many mentions have been made. Next slide takes us to something familiar to all those who have attended my past 2 lectures. Our limited resources. I wish to emphasize and to request all of us that have participated in this training, in this discussion, in this conversation, to think about solar energy. On Friday afternoon, I got a visitor in my office who I took around ICAD to the library, to the guest house. By the way, those in attendance and not conversant, ICAD has very good facilities for seminars, conferences, and accommodation. And this lady, who is a nun in a congregation, asked me, Professor, you told us sometime and you are emphatic about renewable energy, green energy. You have 4 blocks, actually 5, and I didn't see any solar panel. That was a shock of my life in the day. I prayed. We have a common place called the atrium, and the African court. We had reached the African court. I prayed the ground could solve me, and I must convince management that very soon we start piecemeal on getting energy, at least for our servers, so that at any one time, the ICAD servers are well served with energy. In other words, renewable energy technology companies out there are a hot cake, supply free solar energy equipment if approached, particularly for the East African universities, where insolation is dying of old age. The incoming solar budget per day astride the equator, I don't think we get out of the equatorial zone. Most of our universities, I was checking all of you, the participants in this call and in participation of this training, we are within the equatorial zone. So our engineering department, our IT department can team up and we think of getting this energy. We can reach out to industry. Why do we close ourselves as universities? Let us reach out to industry. Let us go and tell them we can be experimental grounds for their production. And of course, you can see astride the equator is where we have the highest darkness. And yet, far away from the equator, people are utilizing green energy. And they are coming to sell us their research findings when we should be the ones selling our research findings, partner up with them because of their high sophisticated research they have done and equipment they hold. The next slide Of course, I didn't explain this young man. He's taking time and he's working behind schedule so that tomorrow is not beaten, as we had seen in the previous presentation. Researchers can lobby universities to accept marketing companies through research equipment donation. Our departments can actually go to all these companies we have put in this slide and interest them to own space within our university, particularly in engineering, in the material science, in the food science, in the microbiology and technology and IT, specimen breeding houses, physics, chemistry, biochemistry. These companies can amazingly come to our institute. And when we get there, then I can assure you, we shall have broken into the ranks of giving our students we are supervising a new era, a better era than we went through. We needed an equipment way back in 1996 to check on the honesty of the students that were doing forest inventory in Bwindi, Echuya, and Mugahinga forests. And later on, Chibare forest took up our experimental and technical ideas. So, as a team, we contracted someone from the physics department at University of Cape Town who had an appliance called Palm Pilot. This is a gadget that you put icons like of all these companies. But for the forest research, we put on icons of gorillas, icons of bamboo, let's say Prunus africana, icons of different monkeys, because within the fraternity of rangers, before 1996, if you had not qualified to senior 4, you do not be employed. But we convinced Uganda Wildlife Authority and National Forest Authority that this equipment, anybody who has lived with the forest like pygmies can see and monitor by using a Palm Pilot. And this Palm Pilot would generate data that when put into a digitized map, of which we are going to be introduced to shortly as the final seminar presentation or conference or training presentation, then the different dots of how this ranger or how this researcher has traversed the forest would take you to the different points on the digitized map. And I can assure you, this made a breakthrough in the campfire of Zimbabwe, in the Kalahari forest research on the Hoodia plant, which has become a very good energy booster and immunity booster in the different companies that use it for production of different compounds. And for that matter, this professor was working with Sharp, but they patented their work, and now all GIS and other equipment producers are paying royalties. And it is at this point that if we teach our students on patenting, legislation, and intellectual property rights, then we shall have a paradigm shift of any of our graduate students to look at the income that is lifelong and can be handed over to other generations that we don't have, some of us who are in our evenings. Because a patent is forever as long as its use is still required. And this is the way to go. And for that matter, I would wish that some of our universities, computer laboratories, subject-specific laboratories, biology laboratory, botany laboratory, zoology laboratory, biochemistry laboratory, we start looking at the equipment we have bought expensively, and we write to them to be their research centers on new equipment, on the repair of equipment. By the way, under the Mbarara University Faculty of Science, equipment repair, under the technology diploma, many things came up, and I can assure you, even Makerere University, as we speak today, in zoology, and across in biochemistry, and across in Mulago, the organic chemistry lab of the pharmacy, of the School of Pharmacy, equipment repair has become such a lucrative business, which within the new curricula of the CBC or the hands-on curricula, these are some of the issues and ideas we can sell to the education schools, to sell to the high schools and secondary schools and primary schools, and we shall have a new blended paradigm shift that can even ease our areas of supervision, whereby if Dominic is through the CBS, the new curriculum, and comes for master's or PhD, I can assure you it will be as easy as eating overcooked matoke, which in our area we say does not give energy, but helps you to get satisfied for a short time. We shall get there. When we go to these companies, there is even a possibility of donating equipment. While we were in Malaysia, we were at Sun City University. It was an area that started as a mining area, and the company converted it into a university. I can't tell you how much the university depends on the other sections of the company in mining, in the equipment production, as a hospital. And it has excelled in the global tourism of other countries within the Southeast Asia, but also from Africa. Therefore, as universities, let us learn from some of the universities that have expanded into the earning arm, like here where we sit, Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology, as Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology Enterprise. So do our universities have enterprises that can help some of our good students with good ideas, but no funding? And this is the way to go. Maybe some of the universities that don't know JKWAT, Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology, before we run far away to benchmark, you can come here and benchmark and learn how much they earn. We can run to other universities that have consultancy firms, like Makerere University. It has several consultancy firms at college level, and some of these consultancy firms within the university have helped to expand even in the areas, like in the College of Engineering at Makerere University. They even expanded into production of seedlings. And these are some of the ideas that I hold and have shared with you that can help us get more resources for research, get more resources for our good students that have not had resources to fund their ideas, and we do credible work and become centers of excellence. And I think very soon Mbarara University of Science and Technology, with our foundation and having gotten the World Bank funding for Center of Excellence through from BioTrack, I hope very soon we should have a line of indigenous knowledge and traditional knowledge, a line of medicine, because in essence, Southwestern Uganda and in Africa generally, people depend on herbal medicine and they trust it more than the conventional medicine. When we go to the next slide, it brings us to our modern way of how things have been running. In the health sector, in the recent 2 decades, we have suffered a spate of viral diseases that have even of recent closed the world or closed the business globally under the code name COVID-19. Of course, there were even other COVID levels, COVID numbers. But this can help us as supervisors think out of the box, because engineering, in material science and sociology, and the present time catch disciplines can move funding to ourselves and our students. Let's take an example of Johnson & Johnson or Pfizer or those Moderna or even Bayer that teamed up to beat the global protocols of the World Health Organization, where a vaccine must be produced, having gone through the protocols with a minimum of 15 years. The same thing we have in our academia as we supervise, because your master's came out after 3 years, your PhD came out after 7 years. You wonder how Dominic can do a PhD in 2.5 years. But times have changed. Technology has come. You used to sit in the lab and do your work, record your data, do a fair copy, and go and give it to someone who had a typewriter to type it for you. You read through. I can assure you now you can collect data as you type your work. Now you can even scan a document and you type over as a reference. So times have changed. And as times change, then we need to work like Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Moderna and others that produced a vaccine in 9 months. I would wish to learn and hear and witness PhDs which should be written in 1.5 years. PhDs which can be written in 1 year. Because after all, a good PhD in every subject discipline must have moved with time of the ideas of a problem that you saw and you wish to research through your bachelor's, maybe through your high school, through your bachelor's degree reading, master's, and by the time of the PhD is within your knowledge, is within your reach, is within your head, is in where we are thinking. And this is the way to go. And as we go by that, it's high time we interested these companies that have money and can only sponsor football. They don't even sponsor netball. My dear supervisors, everybody listening in, you will see a damn check of 10 million pounds going to buy someone. But we have not seen a damn check going to buy that civil engineer, that classic architecture engineer who has done wonders in coming up with a structure, with an artistic impression of the tallest building in Africa. I've not heard about it. If I'm ignorant or I'm out of the space where it has been, let's bet and tell me about it. And the moment we start going that way, I can assure you, we shall have broken into the ranks of the funding that we can't even exhaust. We shall be scratching our heads to get new ideas. Let me tell you something very interesting. I am such a stupid researcher that I don't know any of the world soccer teams and their players. But when I thought about it 2 weeks ago, as I was prepared, 3 weeks ago, as I was preparing this slide, then now I'm even about to go to cinema and watch football if I don't have data on my phone. And this is where we lose out as academics. We tend to follow one line. We never want to migrate into other lines. And as I was telling you, the lines of intercept are the points to deal with and investigate more about. And when we also look at this, then I'll give an example of how the COVIDX that was produced by Professor Guang ran out before it could go into the clinicals. But I wish to appreciate and thank him because it saved some people. The inception of COVIDX comes from some products from Fagara microphylla, which is a lowland forest tree. And in our local language, Western Uganda, we call it Omuremankove. It has spiked thorns, meaning Omuremankove, even the baboons, the chimps cannot climb it. And that product saved the world. And I think that's why some leadership in Uganda boasts of having tamed COVID-19. But I can assure you, the research on COVIDX was not in that year and was not 2 years behind and was not 5 years behind. This has been over 2 decades research on virus and the epithelium lining and the choking of the epithelium. Therefore, some of the students that we supervise, some of the work that we deal with, particularly in the medical and food technology, the products that come up are not instant, are not as experimental as in chemistry. Of course, when we were in senior 2 and senior 3 and we went into chemical changes and studying physical and chemical changes, some of our fellow students or fellow pupils, because at all levels you still have the name pupil, out of curiosity, caused terrible accidents by mixing, the way you mix acid and water should be not the other way. And for that matter, we need to avoid experimental accidents, because a student you are supervising out of curiosity could write to the companies because he's heard there is funding before you do protocols of the department, the faculty, the university, and that will cause a mayhem to the institution. Therefore, it's high time we sat as supervisors and came out with protocols, guidelines, and procedures on how to approach some of these credible philanthropists and companies of high repute, so that should we move as students, graduate students, and supervisors, those protocols are diplomatic, those protocols are dependable, those protocols can take us to the levels we need to interject into the funding they have. And that's why within the soccer fraternity, there are protocols of buying players, there are protocols of funding clubs, and of recent, I'm a student and a scholar of that area. So that should we sit down in the near future to write these protocols, then we don't reinvent the wheel. We borrow the protocols that have increasingly gone into the kingdoms, the kings who have a lot of money that is lying idle. When we do that, then we shall have broken into the ranks of having our students do their theses, do their research on record time in a short time. We have Bayer. Bayer produces agricultural inputs, agricultural products, and there are other companies that produce fertilizer. And these are some of the companies that our universities, our departments, and faculties of agriculture, colleges of agriculture and environment can also quickly go into their requirements on how to access funding from them, and we get there. In my last week topic of mentorship, I talked about the competition of global leaders that visited Kenya. IMF came last, of course, under the strong decision of the present government not to borrow more, because if you have, let's say, a coffin business, I wonder whether you make prayers that we die and you sell your coffins. If you are a supervisor and within your discipline, in 3, 4, 5 years, you have no student wanting to do research with you, then you need to sit back and say, what's the problem? And you look for a bait for us students, prospective students, to come on board. Therefore, the visit of these great leaders, the visit of these personalities had hidden ideas behind them, and the ideas were behind the technology they produce, which we use. And that's why even when we start producing the technology that can compete with them, then they must come with systems to circumvent either tax-free equipment or others. So when we study all this ecosystem of resources, all this ecosystem of getting to know where the resources are, how to get them, how to maintain them, and how to create an environment that those who produce them can do technology transfer to us, and even how to teach our students who have not used these technologies on how to use them. And also in my previous presentation, how I said that as university management and as university managers and institute managers, we need also to start rebelling from the Western world and say, let's have a paradigm shift, that if a student is to do an analysis in Kansas, in the US, in the University of Tsukuba in Japan, why not request that partner or co-supervisor that you identified to come and have the analysis done in Africa, done in your university? Japan has excelled in engineering of bridges globally. China has excelled in the engineering of bridges. Thailand, some of our professors and staff have studied in these countries, in these states, in these universities. But rarely do we study abroad and bring back those professionals and senior faculty to get interested where we came from. But they get interested in what knowledge we took there, what specimen we took there. It's high time we interested everybody to bring those resources which are human, to train more resources, and we get a multiplier effect. Let me give an example. It beats my understanding all these years when Association of African Universities and Inter-University Council of East Africa and many others that have dealt with Western world and old world universities, that we refused to come up with guidelines of emeritus professor. So that if we had that policy and that space to feed, then we would reach out to universities that have professors who have retired, and we bring them here either as promoters and moving encyclopedia. I'll give an example that of recent students are able to drive within and outside the universities. But for information, there are universities where even a vice chancellor or a rector does not drive in. All of you park at the gate. It's only the emeritus professors who are either in wheelchairs or driven in their cars that enter the university. Because universities are factories of knowledge, and you can hit people who are moving thinking. And we need to teach some of these skills to our students, to think all the time, to wake up at 3 a.m. when an idea has come and put it down. Because should you not put it down, it will go. And this is why MRI and other universities and Cambridge are doing more research in psychology and how to come up against dementia, against old age, against memory loss. And these are the researches we need also to get engaged into, and we have a platform where we can negotiate with those who have excelled. I have talked without any interjection. I wonder whether I was communicating or not communicating. So allow me stop here and request that people give comments, subtractions, additions, and we crown it all, but keeping in mind that research labs, conference halls, libraries, key infrastructure can be named after the various companies as a means of marketing them, but the source of equipment and resources for our universities, for ourselves, for our students. I move around. If you move past the KU, you'll see Chandaria building. That must be a resource to Kenyatta University. So it's high time we came up with some of these things, but avoid what Professor Mahmoud Mamdan wrote about Makerere University as a book title called Makerere University, a Marketplace. Globally, you can never mix business with academia. And we need to avoid that. Resources might be required. The world might have become too economic. It is very hard to make and see the next hour or the next day. But as long as we want to remain productive in new knowledge and knowledge that will solve our problems and challenges, and later on when we begin thinking to research on interest, that will show us the new gaps within the market chain, within the research chain, and within the knowledge chain that we research on new interests, then we shall have lost it all. It is my plea, it is my request that as we remain academicians, we avoid being too much economically driven, because in the end, the young tax, the young brains we are mentoring might not realize that economics are under academia, and you immediately lose them. Please feel free to raise your hand and we share on your experiences. Those have been my experience, but crown it all, I was lucky and able to win. My first biggest grant winning for resources for research for small grants was the UNESCO and People and Plants project of £556,000 from Bara University. Of course, the Millennium Science initiatives, we are competing with other universities on IAT mark. Bara University won about $1.5 million, which gave us a great mantle of the Masters in Education. And when it came up, I can assure you, the universities within Western Uganda, the universities within Western Uganda have good background. Thank you. Participants and members, Patrick, maybe you probe your participants.
I'm looking for hands.
Yeah, they are nowhere.
I don't see any hands up.
Yes. Then you better call in.
But I can see somebody here. I can see somebody here called Valence Habyarimana talking about Turnitin software.
Turnitin?
Yeah, Turnitin software is a requirement for every researcher. Okay. But it seems, is it, yeah? And also Dr. Kinyuru has his hand up.
Let him yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, Dr. Kinyuru.
Thanks, Prof, for the good presentation. You know, from my experience with the universities abroad, you find that graduate students are given offices, they are given printers, they are given, you know, a lot of resources, including softwares, also login details to access databases for publications, etc. How are we doing in Africa, in our African universities, and what can be done?
Thank you. When you enter the gates of University of Cape Town, you are given a password for printing until you leave, no limitation. You are given passwords of all important journals. You are given password for the Web of Science. But above all, when you enter the library and even some faculty buildings, you will not access Gmail and Yahoo. The same thing I saw in China, the same thing I saw at University of Tsukuba. We tend to be limited and don't want to expose our students because we want to be the only people that know. And until we remove that in our thinking, in our practice, what I said when I was talking about mentoring, we remain and we will remain below the other universities. When I entered the University of York as a postdoc, I was given a lab, I was given 2 technicians, I was given an office, and of course the university identity card is a key to everywhere. But you can see, because we have gone economic, our students are a source of income, then there are limitations. But again, Dr. Kinyuru, there is what we lack. That we don't have discipline. You will give a seminar at University of York, or you'll give a seminar at University of Tsukuba, but when it comes to refreshments, only invited people are there. But when it comes to the plenary, people even sit on the floor. So mannerism is another thing, right from the students to the top professors. I think we need a department to educate everyone at staff level, management level, student level, graduate student level, to mentor us in the mannerism of managing and hunting for knowledge, where it has no boundaries, but when you go to hunt for knowledge, you mind your business. Thank you, Dr. Kinyuru. I think we need another talk to involve the social sciences to come up with a very good seminar or conference about mannerism. Otherwise, I can assure you the engineering faculties are ahead, because the health area faculties, veterinary and human are ahead, because you'll go visiting a patient in a hospital. You must remove your shoes. You must disinfect. And you see the protocols are well followed. But when you go to chemistry, biochemistry, and others, and the production line in pharmacy, they are not as clearly followed or clearly spelled out as it is in human medicine and veterinary medicine. I think we need these, and some of these issues, like the two topics I have handled, are not conventional topics, but online you can get a few guidelines and materials, but intrinsically within us in Africa, we don't have this information and knowledge. We need it, we need to rejuvenate it. It was there within our traditional and indigenous communities. We need to come up and put it straight again.
Prof. Twaha?
Yes, Twaha?
Yes. Hello, colleagues. How are you?
Fine, Professor Basamba.
Yes, I will.
Technology.
So I would like to first of all, I would like to thank ICAD for having organized this meeting for us. I can assure you, Dr. Dominic was complaining that people are not asking. We are here smiling. We are satisfied. I don't think we are not watching you. We are watching here, but the fact that we are keeping quiet should give you a message that the audience is happy. I'm one of those people who think like that, at least. And I'm sure I'm not alone. So personally, I'm very impressed, and I'm glad that ICAD organized this, and I congratulate myself for having successfully been selected to attend this course. There are many things I didn't know, I have to admit. There are many things I take for granted, but now I have been humbled, and I am very confident I'm going to become a better supervisor, a better mentor, and probably become more productive, because I've learned that learning never ends. There's a time when I used to think that I was so powerful in terms of knowledge and I could walk with my head high. Now my head is in the middle of my body, really. I'm not as high as I thought, because I've been humbled, really. So having said that, the question I want to raise here, and this is from my own experience and maybe the experience of others, is what many colleagues have been talking about as quite often, many of us are comfortable working with water samples, and we come up with very good papers on biophysical issues, which is very good, and it promotes science. But what we forget, me inclusive, is that this knowledge and information is meant for the consumption of the local person. The final consumer is the people, because we do research to change society. We do research to improve lives. We do research to improve livelihoods. We do research to improve income, to change the status quo, so that as researchers, we can also contribute socio-economic transformation of mankind, either locally, nationally, or globally. So, my challenge has always been that how can we do research which is interdisciplinary? You know, you talk to your soils, you talk to your, but at the end of the day, you also need to talk to the people who are affected by these researches. So my question to colleagues, and specifically Dr. Yarugabe, Professor Yarugabe, is what would we do to make sure that we do research, which is a package? You are doing research on biological resources, or you are, what is your specialization, Dr. Professor Yarugabe, you do? thing, bees, for example, how can we use this thing, bees, in such a way that the data we generate from the field is incorporated into the socio-economic transfer? And I'm talking like that because recently I supervised how we can maintain soil fertility by improving yields on the farm and then getting profits from the farm, which you can use to reinvest in managing soil fertility. But when we came to the defense, many people brushed this thing out. They brushed it off. They said, "But is this man a soil scientist or is a sociologist?" But for those who understood what we were doing, they later on realized that actually this was a very practical product. We are looking at soil sciences, but involving the human being and economics. So because this is what actually happens in real life. People interact with the soils, people interact in the markets, and in real life, we have to interact. So I don't know what your comment will be, but I also don't know if my question is clear.
Yeah, Professor, I have understood.
Okay,
and that's why the VCRES under BioInnovate 1, the VCRES research on around Lake Victoria that involved most East African professors and researchers. If you didn't write, this was under Associate Professor Ogutu. If you didn't write a multifaceted proposal, you'd never be given funding. I think we have enough foundation about it, but what remains is what I talked about in my mentorship presentation. We have a lot of selfishness, and we don't want to learn from others. We don't record, and we think the indigenous and traditional communities don't measure up to the levels of universities. And let me tell you, I would wish to congratulate the people who, the parliamentary members of education sector parliamentary committee in Uganda, who came up with the Tertiary and Universities Act and specified that Senate must have people from the community. A viva must be open. Now some universities have taken it up so that you get ideas. But from the several years I've done research in communities, and when we introduced the short courses and the diploma and certificate course on technology at Mbara University, and when we introduced ethnobotany course at Makerere University with the likes of Professor Kakudidi, the late Professor Bukenya Zerava, Professor Muchungs and others, and Professor Kasenene, the former Vice Chancellor of Mountains of the Moon, we got knowledge that we could not use and write in our papers from forest inventories and community sociology information that gave us a foundation to write short courses and eventually ethnobotany. If you look at the beverages, what I said last Friday, the beverages on the market in Uganda, in East Africa, that are not conventional Coca-Cola, are not conventional Pepsi-Cola, are not conventional Schweppes. I can assure you this has killed the market of the conventional multinational Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola. You'll find in Western Uganda or even in Kampala, Central Uganda, Northern Uganda. Now people are on shea butter beverages. People are on alloy beverages. People are now coming up with products simply because we produced a lot of graduates that got the practical skills and went out to form their own jobs. So to answer your question directly on how knowledge and researchers and supervisors can contribute directly to the socio-economic transformation of society through research, we need to sit down, and the impending training we hope to do on patenting, intellectual property rights, and how to derive new ideas. If we brought the food science specialists, we brought the ecologists and sociologists and indigenous communities who know what plants and what animals contributed to the hunter-gatherer society food or components, then I can assure you, we should come up with a package on how to change, on how to tell that old faculty professor in Senate or at a Viva who doesn't know that if we have less nitrogen, let's say within the tea production, then your green leaf will not be the best for the best tea, because anthocyanins go in complexity with nitrogen. So these are some of the issues that I would say we tend to call ourselves experts, but we are somehow ignorant in some aspects. And this is the time to be honest. Someone commented on foreign students. A foreign student from Africa will go up there and quickly come up with a PhD. But rarely do senior professors he left behind will accept that he has finished or she has finished a PhD in 2.5 years. Because for us, we did it in 7 years. And it's because we lacked resources. We misused the time. We buried all the time. We attended all the weddings. But when you go out there, all the time you are in the lab. When you come to work abroad, all the time you have time for your desk, and you find you are a problem to that community. So these are the issues. We need to sit down and agree what are the standards and how can we do it. And I can even assure this meeting that it's high time, even in engineering, they come to understand a lot of biology. Because when I was an external examiner at University of Suba, that is in 2014, November, and again at University of Cape Town, just in 2019, the audience of the biologicals and the physical sciences, 80% are engineers and lawyers within the audience of a Viva. Why? Because it is of recent that there are many cases that involve science, and the lawyers want to understand that science, and they can do it through some of these conversations at Viva, at seminars and inaugural seminars. There is nothing in engineering that doesn't have a counterpart in nature. So engineers are out to understand how the physiology of some of these organisms work, the architecture and the anatomy of some of these organisms, and that's why and how they develop their technologies. So, but at Makerere University, where Professor you sit, at Mbara University, at Jomo Kenyatta University here where we are, you will find rarely do people of a different subject or discipline go to a Viva, which is parallel to what they are doing. And we need to stop this. And that's when we shall be multidisciplinary. For example, in Vicres, I won a funding with Dr. Manyasa, a social scientist, and Dr. Zachary Kwena from Kemri, and myself from Barara, to do research on witchcraft. I can't tell you how much we came up with, because in Western Kenya, professors will get children get malaria, but they must first consult their traditionalists. So these are issues. So we need to open gates. We need to be like universities where the first semester is not Professor Twaha, Professor Dominic, Dr. Kinyuru, Patrick Wawa, and others to lecture. No, it is the successful community opinion leaders that come to discuss and converse with these honors, masters, and PhD degrees. And when they shoot questions, they get ideas, they get titles for research. But for us, when we speak to the students, the new students, we tend to convince them and interest them to be in the areas we have exhausted so that they are easy for us to supervise. That should end. That should stop.
So, Prof,
Ahmed, there is a
Mr.
hand from Ahmed.
Yeah, Ahmed. There was a
Hi,
comment.
Prof.
Okay, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Patrick. I will
Yeah,
be
okay.
next. Yeah.
There was a comment by Professor Evans Nyakeri, and I don't know whether he wants to, present it himself, or I can go ahead and read. Let me just read it. So he says, dear Prof, thanks for the explicit and informative presentation. Kindly comment on the varied promotion schemes in our different universities. A professor used to be the ultimate sources and reservoirs of knowledge that they could epitomize during inaugural speeches. Nowadays, we professors in our universities, whose area of mastery and professorship is hardly known within our own universities. Is there a way that ICAD and other players can initiate policy initiatives to promote standardization so that when I become a professor, it is not just within in name, but also indeed a truly universal, professor. This also goes for Professor Emeritus. So maybe I suggest you can comment on that and then Ahmed, or you can take Ahmed's also and then comment on both.
Let me
Ahmed,
first
go
comment
ahead.
on that for memory purposes.
Okay, fine.
I think on our side as professors, we have also lost it because when I was at university, undergraduate and masters and elsewhere I have gone, before Dominic or any other person is announced as a professor, he's announced on an inaugural lecture. How many inaugural lectures do we have in our universities of to date? Nothing. Instead, we get lectures of foreigners coming to lecture us, but rarely do we have students. He has challenged us as ICAD because we are a think tank on behalf of university management. I wish to assure everybody listening in that the comments, the suggestions, the ideas that have come from our participants will add on to the ideas that ICAD, through the head of programs and management, came up with these seminars. And we synthesize and look at policy briefs that we'll take through our governing board, but also through the annual general meeting that is composed of vice chancellors to quickly at least get 3 things out: emeritus professor positions, inaugural lecture revival, and the explicit opening of gates to indigenous and traditional opinion leaders. Because after all, we do research to transform society. And if we are to do it, we must know what they think about and what their challenges are. And ultimately, when those things are revived and they are practiced day in, day out, any professor will ultimately be heard. Any professor will be known, rather than only being known as introductions at meetings, but we should also introduce it. I liked how JK graduates their PhDs, but I like how all the universities even graduate their masters. There is a person who recites what you have researched on, what you have found out, and eventually, most universities require that before you graduate, you must have done a publication and at least one dissemination seminar to the core community that contributed to your research. And this is what we lack. But I know most parliaments are now coming up with ideas tailored to that direction. I recently had a meeting with the acting commissioner higher education in Uganda. These are the ideas they are looking at. And that's why even the funding, the foreign funding to universities must be interpreted into the university budget paper. But gradually we used to have funding. It comes, you do research, you report the, quietly there, and these things must end. But of course, with technology, there's nothing secret anymore. I thank you. Ahmed?
Ahmed, yes.
Thank you so much, Prof. I have learned from you a lot since the training. And I have here a comment and also an experience that I had with my supervisor. But let me submit my comment about a sub-Saharan Africa vision. In 2008, World Bank published a vision that said that
Kindly unmute yourself, Ahmed. Technical hitch.
Unmute yourself.
yes, Prof. Can you hear me right now?
Yes, yes, go ahead.
Okay. I was saying that in World Bank in 2008, they published a vision in sub-Saharan Africa, and they said that the sub-Saharan Africa must catch up in terms of transformational change in the smallholder economy. And they were investing in the human capital, which needed to participate effectively in the world economy. In terms of economic performance compared to the rest of the world. I was looked this publication and I was found that the supervisory relationship between the supervisor and the student has a relationship that affects the shaping and also the transformational economy in the sub-Saharan Africa. For example, when the supervisors supervise their students in the area of the research, they're supposed to guide them properly and also give them a very good time. But there are few faculty members that can meet this kind of requirements. And there was an incident that happened to me when I was doing my master's degree. My supervisor was loaded me a lot of tasks. He's supposed to help me and make an schedule to supervise me and also give me advices, but he ended up being overloaded me and not giving me a chance to improve. When the student expect the supervisor to be available, they will say that I will meet you in the next week. I will find you a time in the next month. And it is difficult to the students to contact them. This may leave the students with feeling of being neglected, not getting enough help from the supervisors as expected. So if you try to complain, they will never get you to progress, and also maybe you will end up expelled and maybe you will not proceed your degree. So I'm saying right now, Prof, how this kind of challenge will help the sub-Saharan Africa and to achieve the vision that World Bank already published in their vision was that to catch up the transformational change in the terms of economy, while a lot of supervisors were not helping their students. I submit. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed. I do hear you loud and clear. Fortunately, I didn't experience your identical experience because I was supervised by clear-headed people, and I don't get surprised to see where they are, because my home promoter for my master's partner to Alan Hamilton of Cambridge, rose from just a professor to a vice chancellor to another university, now National Council for Higher Education. Hamilton, at his 86 years old, is in China looking at new medicine protocols, candidates. So it's very unfortunate. And this is the discussion I've been talking about, and we must openly talk about. But all and above, the World Bank, I happen to have read the same paper. And there is also another paper that was talking about cohort universities. I recall in Uganda in 1989, by then Dr. Ronald Bata, may he rest in eternal peace, Minister of State for Health, when they were arguing with World Bank to establish the second public university in Uganda, as Mbara University of Science and Technology, and we were part of the team. Which shocked us. 25 years down the road, World Bank was the same global institution giving loans and grants for establishment of universities and higher education institutes. So for sure, at the time, institutions like World Bank, IMF, African Development Bank, will criticize ideas of individuals because they have not been tested out. It's like today, bring up a new menu, which is not conventional in hotels. You must first have to convince people and have perception change and behavioral change to eat that menu. So to answer you directly, as academicians, we need to be honest, we need to keep time. And time not for ourselves, but even for those we are mentoring and the students under us. And this is why I said, we need to sit down, having opened this difficult conversation, which even some of us don't agree to, or don't subscribe to. Many of the university managers might oppose, but we put it down. You never know. We could be like World Bank paper, and the paper I read that they wrote when they were refusing Uganda to form a second public university. I think they were refusing Malawi, the poorest education system in Africa, in the same paper to expand secondary education at no cost. So that down the road, whatever we have written down as a spinning out conversation strategy of ICAD, and you people who we selected, and we congratulate you for having one to be part of us. And in future, when we ask for a few shillings or a few dollars, you'll continue the conversation because it is not cheap to run some of these trainings. Then we shall make it a routine. And eventually those who will be there will say, these people had an idea. Since planning is an integral part in development, and we will be there, I can assure you, Ahmad, I can assure you, everybody, that the sky is the springboard. Back to you, Patrick. I can see we are running out of time.
Yeah. Is it a coincidence that as you made your remarks, you talked of keeping time, and then you went ahead and kept time? So thank you very much. It's almost trained. Yeah, it's almost 11 o'clock, and we have another presentation which we are expecting from ESRI East Africa. So if our target is to finish at 11:30, and we are giving them 30 minutes, I think this would be a good time for them to make their presentation. So we thank Professor Byarugaba for that presentation. From the remarks that I'm reading on the chat, and also just the comments that have been made by those that have been able to speak, I can see that the presentation was received very well, and it was a useful presentation. So we thank you again, Professor Byarugaba. Nation Adero, Are you there and ready?
Yes, I'm here ready.
Okay, so Javan, can you work with the Nation, please, to have his presentation up so that he can make it in the next 30 minutes or so?
Yeah, I think he can share. Yeah, thank you.
So Nation, just maybe introduce yourself briefly, say something about S3 East Africa, and then just carry on with your presentation.
Okay, thank you. I'm Nation Adero, presenting here from S3 Eastern Africa, which is well known to most of us. The office based in Nairobi, Cusco Center. And very well we know about the S3 100 African Universities program, which has been key to ensuring the uptake of S3GS solutions in colleges and universities. And I'm S3 Eastern Africa GS Ambassador, but also a lecturer at Taraveta University, which is one of the universities in Kenya that have benefited from S3 100 African Universities program. So I'm presenting here today as S3 GS Ambassador, but bringing on board that first-hand experience from universities and lessons that we can learn so that we can integrate geospatial technology into our education systems. So I'm happy to be here today and also here with Byron Anangwe, who is the Business Development Manager. Thank you. So I can proceed, given that we need to understand how geospatial technology can help advance education agenda, more so in the modern times. The professor was just presented before me, has talked a lot about the progression we have realized in education and the need to ensure interdisciplinary working spaces. And yes, technology is one such technology that is an integrator and could be very helpful to supervisors if we are to ensure that the work that is conducted by postgraduate students is verifiable and is also place-based or location-based. And you can also share evidence with stakeholders. So S3 has been serving users, and you can see we call GS the science of where, because it shares location-based intelligence, which is verifiable. And what you can see through visual maps can easily be verified, not just by the elite in academia, but ordinary stakeholders, the public. Because if you are to map out the spread of services, maybe access to water services in a given municipality, it is one thing to share the statistics that maybe 40% of the residents can access piped water, but quite another thing to show it in the form of a map so that you can see where the 40% live. Is there geographical bias? Only the high-end estates accessing piped water. And this brings out a different dimension to decision support, especially policy decision support. And if we are to meet the SDGs, then we need the geographic approach, and hence the GS solutions that S3 has been advancing over the years. So in education, there is generational succession. You will agree with me that education has progressed from the unidirectional flow of instruction and knowledge from a teacher with minimum use of technology to what it is today, that is learner-centered with feedback. And this feedback also helps the teacher to deliver better, because feedback from your students and what we call reverse mentorship makes you a better teacher and a better supervisor. That is why S3 solutions are addressing even K-12, that is what we call our basic school levels. They also need to develop the skills in spatial thinking, to visualize events in space over time, and also in the higher education curriculum. And these are some of the links. After sharing this slide, you can use some of these links to learn more as a teacher, lecturer, supervisor, how you can teach using GS technology. There's a compulsion to change a mindset, even career mindset. And I'm happy that this rhymes very well with the message that the first presenters put across, that we must recognize that we are advancing from linear career growth trajectory to interdisciplinary working spaces. And how can GS technology help us to deliver on this interdisciplinary collaboration so that as a team, we can come up with better projects, better research that can impact positively on society. And we cannot say that we have not learned GS before, so we can't use it. This can be challenged if you read this saying attributed to Aristotle, that for the things we have to learn before we can do them, we learn by doing them. So you can start learning today by doing them, and you'll enjoy how GS can help you to advance your career and research. Now, why geospatial technology? If you look at the data we have today in the digital media storage, your handsets, computers, servers, it has been estimated that it is slightly more than 50 zettabytes. That is, a zettabyte is a billion terabytes. But if you look at this data, the largest share of this data is geospatial data, or geographically referenced data. It is data that you can link to coordinates, real world coordinates. And that is why we call it geodata. And it is the principal share of that data. So GS technology, because it uses geospatial data, is key to this data-driven digital revolution that the world is realizing. And that's why we say geodata is, if you look at our body, how our body works, as a living system, we can say geodata is the blood, but we need human capital, the knowledge workers, the professors here, as the brain, the experts, the GS experts. Again, what do we need for this ecosystem to be healthy and functional? Then you need mentors and champions as the inspirational backbone. So as a supervisor, how can you integrate GS technology into your supervisory work? How can you ensure that this knowledge and practice is taken up by your students? And you have to inspire, you have to lead the change by being culturally fluent with the current trends in technology. And then technology is the nervous system. Our body also needs the nervous system for communication. And this is what we liken GS to. In fact, the founder of Esri has defined GS as a digital geospatial nervous system. So we need GIS for geodata analysis, modeling, and visualization of maps. So look at this quadrant, which I've used to share in 3D, if you like it. In the x-axis, we are looking at the time horizon from the past into the distant future. And then in terms of color, we are classifying these technologies in terms of their maturity level, what is mainstream, what we can say still in the bleeding edge, and then green, what is under early adoption. Now you can see 5G, for example, is under early adoption, and you can see the red ones, bleeding edge. We are even talking of geoengineering, so that we can address climate change by cooling the radiation from the sun. And you can see these are transformational when we look at the marketplace, but they are still under the bleeding or cutting edge technology. Surveying and GIS, as we have known it, has developed from the early times in Egypt when we had 2D cadastre. And so these have been mainstream, but now we need to move into the space of high impact and transformational impact. And for that, we also need to know how technology is changing over time. Now, if you look at the orange and red, this is where we are going. This is where we are moving into even geomedicine, quantum computing, and you will see that geospatial data that is linked to geographical location is critical to the research going into these areas. And the crop or the generation of researchers, young researchers today, will be more fascinated with these trending technologies, and you'll agree with me that geospatial data will be key to enhancing research and disruptive innovations in those areas. And that is why we need to have an idea of what geodata can do and how GIS technology can help us to integrate better within collaborative groups and advance to what we call parametric policy making. Parametric in the sense that you need explicit parameters, not just talking of policy in terms of broad statements or value statements, but also where that policy is going to impact. Refer back to the example I gave of water services in a given municipality, having statistics that 40% can access water services, piped water services, but you're not mapping out for us to see where, so that you can even involve the local stakeholders, the MCS, to interrogate your work as a professor and tell you, yes, you have painted my municipality in green to show that it is accessing quality water services, but I live there. That is not the case. So go back to the drawing board. And that is where GIS is helping to expand and democratize this environment for transparent research or end-to-end transparency with stakeholder validation. So we can say that GIS is key to the integrated approach. So if you are going to develop a decision support system and ensure the participation of stakeholders, you need GIS technology. If there's an environmental problem, for example, degradation of water resources, we need to consider the water resources as a social organism. They are interconnected and they also interact with human activities in the surrounding, the catchment-based approach. And so you can see the geography coming in very strongly. So the key features of GIS-based solutions, we can look at those 7 T's. We need timing, testing, and tracing. We need transparency from data to insight, all through to evidence and decisions that can be owned. We need transdisciplinary approach. We need training in all the 4 V's of data. We know of data volumes, velocity, variety, and veracity, but we also have other 4 V's that we'll see later, but we also need to build public trust in the kind of research we are conducting to ensure co-creation and co-ownership. And when it comes to data management, because GIS is not complete without data. So how are you going to manage your data? So the fair data principles that we are so familiar with are also key to ensuring that we deliver on the integrated approach, we avoid duplications and gaps, and we also ensure that we address incompatibilities. Now, look at the impactful challenge that is facing us today. You can read from the left to right: political polarization, water crisis, even racial injustice. All these need the sense of where is it happening? And so this slide, which is from the brand is representation, even pandemics, is helping us to see that GIS is not for a chosen elite. It is for everyone, and every discipline can benefit from GIS technology and the visual maps that share information and ensure multi-stakeholder collaboration. GIS is directly integrating data, all types of data. So when we are talking about unstructured data, semi-structured or structured data, data from imagery or Earth observation services. For example, Kenya recently launched Taifa 1 satellite that has been highly celebrated as the first operational Earth observation satellite. So what kind of data will it share, and how can we get value from that data? We need GIS technology to conduct integrated analysis and modeling so that we can leverage policy decision support for agriculture, health, environmental monitoring, early warning systems, and all this is directly integrable within a GIS ecosystem. Now, spatial analytics are also advancing. If you are an economist today, you must be aware of spatial econometrics, where we say that We have economic indicators, but we also need the special dimension of the economic indicators, and that will help to expand the space and make it more inclusive in terms of the recommendations you can give and how these recommendations can be actionable over time and within specific locations of reference. Predictive modeling, also very interesting, because it is one thing to talk of preventive prediction, but quite another talk of predictive. So predictive goes beyond preventive because you anticipate what would happen based on probabilities, and then you take early action. It is a pity that most of our systems in Kenya, in Africa, have been reactionary. We react when there's disaster. But we need to move from that to be able to predict what would happen based on what we can study from geospatial data, maybe the likelihood of a landslide, the likelihood of floods, and that predictive approach will help in the long term to prevent major disasters and ensure that we can gain in the long term. And that is what impactful research should be able to secure. GS is helping in organizing geographic knowledge. You can see data models, maps and visualization, and story maps, very powerful. And I'll show one example of story map, where instead of just the traditional storytelling in paragraphs, you can now integrate interactive maps to communicate your message better. And you can use story map to present the results of your work, and you will get better hearing from policymakers if you can engage them in that kind of visual and geographically sensible environment for communication and feedback. So sustainability is possible. I believe whenever you have a research topic, you ask yourself this question nowadays: which SDGs is this topic addressing? So if you are to talk of sustainability, if you are to deliver on the SDGs, for example, decarbonizing the energy value chain, economic development, conserving the oceans, promoting equity, we all need the geographic approach, the geographic dimension. So GS and the geographic approach not will be as essential, but is already essential and will remain relevant as we proceed. So this example is one of the solutions, is ArcGIS, and we are using ArcGIS Pro, which is now where we are moving into. For those who have been using ArcGIS solutions, ArcMap, for example, now we are moving into the cloud-based ArcGIS Pro. So look at this example. This is a real example from Kenya. If you are to better visualize changes which are mapped to scale over time, and you have minerals, these are the types of minerals we have in Taita Taveta County here, but a policymaker is asking you, can you show me how population density is distributed by county across Kenya? Now you can see in GS, any policymaker, irrespective of the level of education, can agree with you that most of the country is in this color, that is low population density, 6 to 153 people per square kilometer. And you can see a high concentration of population from 1,000 to more than 6,000 persons per square kilometer in Nairobi, Mombasa, a bit of Kiambu. And this can already excite discussion among policymakers and key decision makers. What can we do in order to ensure that we don't have congested cities, that special planning can better inform the distribution of people and activities? And what do we need as pull factors so that we can have a better planned country? You go to countries that have a very good special planning frameworks such as Germany, and then you realize a city like Berlin, for example, which is the capital, does not have more than 4 million people. But you come to Nairobi, for example, we are heading to 6 million very soon. You go to Kampala, you go to Dar es Salaam. So This is already showing you how the geographic approach can help to give a strong background to research questions and where our research should be heading to. Verifiability and transparency. We have said that GIS will aid you in accurately mapping research locations and modeling variables across spatial and temporal scales. This is just one example of Taita Taveta County, where Taita Taveta University is located. And so if you are to show the agroecological zones by arability potential, you can see there's a great variation, but the side of Tanzania to the south is much more arable than this area of Taita Taveta County, which we have here. And you can also display where the minerals are. You can display where we have the Savo National Park, for example, and this kind of visual communication that is not just a picture, but it's a map drawn to scale can help to support decisions better. It has been said that a picture is worth 1,000 words, but we are arguing in the GS community that a map is worth 1,000 pictures. So we need to go mapping, we need to map, but with technology that will ensure verifiability, transparency, and accuracy in terms of scale. So one may ask, how do we advance to that? Because if you are to institutionalize GIS within your university, then you need not just a few individuals, you need the buy-in from the management. You need to ensure that you have the working solutions. For example, the offer from ESRI 100 African Universities program. So at Taita Taveta University, drawing on the key lessons you have had there, the 4 V's I was talking about, you need the vision. You have to focus on the high end. Then you also need visibility. You must organize key events and network to reach out, not just reaching out to the academia, but also to the local communities. Let them know what GIS can do and help improve their lives. Reach out to the county government. And whenever you have International GIS Day events, invite the governor, the way we have been inviting the governors of Taita Taveta County. Then you also need to provide value. Are you integrating GIS into your curriculum so that students and supervisors can see the value, the added value of having maps that communicate with explicit geographical reference metrics, but also the V of volume. It is not enough to produce just 2 or 3 graduates, but we need a critical mass that can ensure the outreach of this new approach and impactful for that matter. So volume is about the aspect of scale. So all these 4 B's are important. And then we have GCM, that is goodwill from the top. So the top management also needs to assure that goodwill, that they are ready to ensure the institutionalization of this solution within the university curriculum and also in the GIS, in the laboratories for GIS or GIS labs in particular. Networking for partnerships must continue. And then we need champions of change within the community, a few champions, 2 or 3, who can help to ensure that this message reaches out far and wide and also wins a buy-in. So this triangle and these 4 B's are key, and they have defined our lessons at Taita Taveta University from way back in 2015 when we started engaging ESRI to 2016 when we got our licenses, and these licenses have been helping in delivery of BSc Geoinformatics training with a practice-oriented approach in our modern GIS lab, and also leveraging the work of master's students, environmental engineering, as well as masters in geoinformatics. So we talked of story maps, that you also need story maps. And I see we have 6 minutes. Don't worry, because I'm going to finish in 2 or 3 minutes. So if you look at this story map, if to give you this example, here I was just trying to show how you can tell your story as a researcher or an internationally exposed scholar. So if you are to make storytelling special you give location to your story. And here I'm selecting examples on alumni seminars and summer school that have been supported under the German Academic Exchange Service. You can see that if you have story maps, you can have that mix of text, but also the maps. For example, here you can show where the various summer schools and alumni seminars have taken place. So as a professor, someone can see your footprint across the globe and what used to happen there, and it is an interactive map. For example, if you click on this, you can see where it was in Valencia, Spain, and what was happening there. This is a waterfall in Elgon area, Uganda. And you also integrate some pictures. You can even integrate videos to communicate effectively. And also it will give you that facility of having maps and interactive maps and videos there. So this is just an example, because we'll share this presentation, you'll be able to follow for yourself and see how GIS story maps, ArcGIS story maps can transform your experience as you communicate to the wider global audience. So back to the final slides. So as we proceed now, we can say that GIS leverages the quality of graduate research and supervision by adding the much needed layer of spatial scale, verifiable location-based outcomes, and transparency with visual maps for active stakeholder multi-stakeholder collaboration and validation of research outcomes. And that part of validation is very important. So as we summarize the way education has been evolving over time from version 1 through version 2, where we integrated technology, version 3, where there's feedback and learner-centered approach with global connectivity. And nowadays we are talking about the 4th industrial revolution. You can see artificial intelligence, virtual reality, all that being integrated into education, adaptive learning platforms, and we also need data literacy. And then into the future, we are talking of the knowledge doubling curve and how the future is going to be influenced more by technology that is blurring traditional disciplinary boundaries. We need to collaborate, and hence GIS will be a key part of the transformation equation. So as I conclude, for those who may want to read more about GIS technology, this is a brand new book that was published in March this year, and we have hard copies now available in Kenya and East Africa. And it is, you can see it is the result of collaborative work. I'm one of the co-authors, so you can also contact us to read more about what GIS can do from a practice-oriented approach, and we'll be able to learn together. Thank you for listening, and I believe now we can interact if there are any questions or comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Adero. And thank you also, Esri, for accepting ICA's request and slotting in seamlessly, despite the short notice. I'm sure this presentation has gone a long way towards enriching the training and has also enhanced the participants' knowledge. So I think it is only fair that we open up for maybe 1 or 2 reactions before we move on. Does anybody wish to make a comment or ask a question? The floor is yours. Okay, Vincent. Yes, Vincent Kanwat.
Yes, thank you so much, Adero. This is but of course, the time has been limited. I only request that if you can post some contacts in the chat so that probably in future we can link up on these, even on the issues of the books. Thank you.
Adero, would you like to respond?
Yes, thank you. And I posted my institutional email address there in the chat section, nelson.adero at ttu.ac.ke. So we can network further on that. And I'll also share with you some of the international conferences that we are organizing so that we can interact more. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Kinyuru, you also have a response. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick, and thanks you, Doc, for the presentation. I'm not sure whether I may have missed this or not, but you know, ICAD brings together about 30 universities across East Africa. How can these universities be able to benefit from some of these softwares and other tools that may be relevant for teaching in their faculty? Well, I'm not sure whether to use the word subsidized or at affordable rates, or whichever, or what options are there for universities to take advantage of ESRI and the partnership between ESRI and ICAD and others. Thanks.
Dr. Adero, go ahead.
Okay, thank you for that question. And universities are better placed to benefit from ESRI GS solutions because you just need to engage ESRI in our region, ESRI Eastern Africa, and sign an MOU with them, and you'll be given a grant of a number of years as agreed to use the software as you prepare, so that after the lapse of that period, you can extend now by paying some agreed and very friendly rates for learning institutions. So that is how Tata Taveta University, for example, has benefited from that, because we were given an initial grant of 3 years. And you will agree with me, after 3 years, if you are master students who started on year 1, you'll have graduates already, and you will also have a buy-in, because these are the people who go to work in industry and also propagate the gospel of GIS and how they apply it. So universities, please engage with us at ESRI, and you'll be able to have the licenses as a grant for a grace period, and we'll also be able to tell you how you can use the licenses for education and research, and even other opportunities to generate income, so that you can direct that income to renew the license after 2 or 3 years. Thank you. And if my colleague Byron has anything to add as the business development manager, I believe he can also add on to that. Thank you.
Byron.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, coordinator, director, and the esteemed faculty members at ICAD. Well, as an entity, we're very keen to work with university institutions, and through the collaboration we have to all that is participating in all the universities in the network of ICAD. We are very keen to push this forward, so we'll be following sessions like the ones we have again with ICAD and build the capacities in the university today. And like 5-10 years ago, as I followed Professor Biarugaba's discussions, the challenges are much less than what they were before. Today, you do not need big laboratories to run most of the softwares that we are supporting, simply because you can run this on the cloud. With a computer even of $1,100, you should be able to run what is on our platform from the cloud, that we can be able to work together to put on the university infrastructure. Director of program, I submit. We continue discussions. You can get to us through office of Patrick, and we are always happy to help. I submit.
Thank you very much, Byron. I believe that would be a good place to end this presentation, and maybe then move on to the next item, and that would be closing. And shortly, I will invite the Executive Director's office, maybe to make some remarks, and then officially close the training. But before I do that, I'd like to just say a few things, mostly just to express, my gratitude as the Training and Extension Director to everybody who has made, this training course a success. And I'd like to start probably by thanking all the participants for their dedication. I think on a daily basis, we've had over 50 people participating in this training every day. And it was also gratifying to note that not only Tanzania, Uganda, and Kenya sent in participants, but we were also able to get participants from Burkina Faso and Somalia. So for that, we are very grateful for that. Then I would also like to thank the team that has worked, very hard in organizing this training. I would also like to thank, the presenters of the sessions, starting with our partners, Ethical Data Initiative, and that would be Sushit, Anand, and Catherine Bailey. And also, the ones that have just concluded their presentation, that is ESRI East Africa, represented by Byron Anangwe and Dr. Nation Adero. Then, of course, I wouldn't forget the presenters of the sessions, beginning with our Executive Director, Professor Bierugaba, Dr. Kinyuru, and I would like to give a special thanks to Dr. Kinyuru, because he's actually the one who came up with the idea of running this course. Then, of course, Professor Tisekwa in Morogoro, Tanzania, and Professor Ouma in Egerton University. And then, of course, the team of, the country office staff who, supported us in various aspects of the course, including playing the role of co-hosts. That is Joseph Mwenda, Geoffrey Rotich, Florence Rugimbana, and Hope Katongole, and of course, Eric Kamau. And I wouldn't want to forget the IT team that made sure that, all the connections, networking, and the Zoom platform that we have used, to run this course worked without any hitches. And for that, I would like to thank Victor Korir and Javan Odhiambo. And if anybody has been left out, it is not intentional. I am grateful to everybody who has contributed in one way or another in ensuring that this course goes on successfully. So there's a few things that are sort of hanging, which are remaining. And one is a questionnaire that we will be sending to participants. At the beginning of the course, before we started the course, we sent you a pre-course questionnaire, and many of you filled it out and sent their responses back to us. We will also be sending a post-training questionnaire to you, and we are requesting that you also fill that one out for us. And then we also indicated that you would be receiving certificates at the end of the course. And we are in the process of preparing these certificates, and they will be sent to you in due course. So that is all from myself. Let me probably now invite the Deputy Executive Director, Dr. Kinyuru, to just probably say a few things, and then invite the Executive Director to close the course for us. Dr. Kinyuru, please.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Ladies and gentlemen, it's really been a great honor to see the whole program for the last several days, I think 10 days, 10, 11 days. And really, it's really a great honor to have you dedicate 2.5 hours of your time to be with us and to go through this process. When we started mooting this idea of offering this program, it was because of the need that we had seen, especially from the young faculty and sometimes the older faculty who needed retooling. But I want to believe that our young faculty, fresh PhDs, and probably PhDs who graduated the last 5 years have really found this to be beneficial. And really, I want to feel that really we have achieved our objective. As ICAD, it is within our mandate to actually offer this kind of capacity building to you and many, many more. So please be looking out on our website and also probably just ensure you're on our mailing list so that in case anything new comes in, we throw it to you and you're able to probably make an application as much as possible. One more thing is that we are in the process of recruiting adjunct research scientists. These are scientists who are going to be affiliated with ICAD and who are going to be partnering with ICAD to develop research grants. And please go to our website and you'll be able to see the position advertised, and kindly feel free to apply. The deadline is open because we want to recruit until we achieve the right number that we are looking for. So please feel free to send in your application as per the guidelines on our website. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to take so much more time. I now want to take this opportunity to invite the Executive Director, Professor Dominic Biarugaba, to come in and make a few remarks as he closes the meeting. Welcome, Prof.
Thank you, Dr. Kinyuru, for the kind remarks and introduction, particularly you and Patrick, who know how to pronounce my name, Biarugaba. In history days, when I used to lecture, I would first bow for my students. So all our participants, I bow before you and thank you and introduce you as our chief guests and participants, the Deputy Executive Director, the Director Training and Extension, ICAD staff, ICAD country directors and their staff at Egerton, Makerere and Sokoine, ICAD headquarters staff, in a special way, the technical team, Mr. Javan, Odiambo and Mr. Korir, Victor, and everyone who has been supporting this system as the Director Training and Extension has mentioned. I'm privileged and honored to be requested to close the first of its kind, our short course on graduate supervisors training. And I wish to say this is the beginning, as the ICAD Deputy Dr. Kinyuru has mentioned. We have a lot more in store for you and for ourselves because we are also learning. And maybe to mention a few things that have transpired through our minds as management of ICAD. We continue to learn, but formerly only public universities were required to partner with ICAD. But the governing board opened up, so now we can partner with private universities and other institutions. So we promise what ICAD will deliver in future will be branded, because competition does not end and we should never compete in the same space, but we should be partners. And here we are as ICAD to partner with you and we deliver good graduate work. Secondly, I wish to inform everybody on call and listening in that this afternoon, ICAD is privileged to have a visitor from the best university in Africa that manages and has managed the data better than any other. And this is KwaZulu-Natal University. We are hosting Professor Johans for a discussion on how to manage data, how to do research better, and the discussions will be communicated, particularly to you who have attended the first training course on supervisors of graduate students. More refresher courses, as the deputy has mentioned, will come up, but particularly we need to be clear about standards, quality, and management of resources, particularly time. And when we do this, then nobody will have blame game, except we'll be shooting in the same goal, and we shall get as many scores as we can, and we excel and transform society, as one of the participants, Professor Tuaha, mentioned. And as another participant, Karen and others were echoing in terms of the quality we need for our graduate students, for ourselves, for our publications. And when we do that, then not later than in the shortest run, that we shall also see ourselves compete favorably in with metrics. Finally, as we give you the certificates, let us look forward to you as ICAD ambassadors on lateral transfer of information, sharing of the materials that we have shared with you, and any other material that you fail to get or place your hands on, especially in the digital space that we have. Feel free to contact the IT team. I hope we won't close the WhatsApp group. People will leave as they wish, but it will remain active and will continue sharing. But in the shortest run, we are hunting for resources that this very first team comes together and gives us ideas, beefs up the head of programs, Professor Kinyuri, the Deputy Executive Director, and management on what other gaps as universities we have out there. Please convey our gratitude to your departments, to your faculties, to your colleges, and to your university management that ICAD is there for you, and ICAD is there for everybody. And I wish to congratulate all of you through the Director Training and Extension who sat a committee and you all qualified to attend free of charge. And I hope in their analysis they have qualified everybody, because the differences in numbers in attendance, I think all of us have attended 80%. And that's why as the executive director, I tried to attend 100%, but I apologize. On Thursday last week, we had a very big function with the Kenya National NGO Forum Council, so we couldn't be everywhere. And with those remarks and the obligation entrusted to me by ICAD management, I congratulate everybody for the successful participation, for the successful teaching, the resource persons, and allow me congratulate the participants on having attended very well, and close this training of the graduate supervisors in our region and those who have participated, and also welcome the inputs of EDI, our partner, ISRI, and others, and promise that the standards will go higher. Please accept my final word to say the training is hereby closed, but the discussions do continue. I thank you. Back to you, Patrick. Patrick?
What can I add?
Hey, when do you give us our certificates?
Yeah, I talked about that. I will give the certificates will will be prepared and they will be sent to the participants.
Thank you.
Yeah. So goodbye, everybody. It was nice
Goodbye.
interacting with you, and hopefully
Bye-bye.
Thanks a
Bye,
lot.
and
Thanks a lot.
thank you so much,
Thank you.
Patrick.
Bye. It has been a wonderful 2 weeks. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Welcome.